Hi everyone, and welcome to the Clean Energy webinar series organized by the Clean Energy Business Council in partnership today with EVO organization. My name is Sophie Collet, and I'm the Managing Director of the CEBC. Our experts today will talk about the impact of COVID-19 on the ESCO M&B activities. We will have Leah Webster, Senior Engineer Principal at Facility Energy Solutions, Amin El Najjar, Director of Operation at Inova, and Gaurav Soni, Project Assurance Manager, O&M and NNV at Engie Smart for Power. So the event will be moderated by Ivan Walters, a partner at Evershed Sutherland and board member of the CEBC. Thank you very much for joining the event today. Just to make sure all the presentation, the document, and the report of the webinar will be shared with you after the event, with you and also with everyone who has registered. Before we go into the discussions and the presentation, let me just very briefly give you an introduction about what CEBC is. We can move on to the next slide, Ahmed. Just to have a very brief overview, so the CEBC is a non-for-profit organization, and we are representing the private sectors involved in the clean energy across the MENA. I think we can move on, Ahmed. We are in the region and operating since nearly 10 years now. And really the goal of the CEBC is to bring the public and the private sector stakeholders together to establish a dialogue between them and to drive, to promote the development of policy to push really the development of the clean energy sector in the region. So we are a non-for-profit organization, but we welcome all membership, whether from individuals, private companies, organizations, are welcome to join based on an annual fee. You can be established in the MENA or outside the MENA and willing to be established in the market. Just to give you a brief overview of our portfolio today, we are having a very wide range of members, whether from the renewables, energy efficiency, green mobility, but also low bank insurance. So we have a very diverse portfolio, and we are working at two different levels. So we are working for our members, and we are also working with a series of partners. And the partners that can be local partners, regional or international partners, where we are developing joint initiatives and joint collaboration. Two more elements. You can move on, Ahmed, for the next slide. So to conduct and to produce all these deliverables, what we are doing, we are hosting workshops, events, and obviously as of today, webinars event as of today. We are publishing also case studies, white papers, and conducting a series of market surveys in the different working groups. You will see on the last slide, the way we are organized depends pretty much on the way our portfolio is built. As of today, we are organized with 3 different working groups, climate finance, energy efficiency, and future mobility working groups. And we also run 2 programs, one dedicated to school education program and one on women in clean energy. So just to give you, and as of today, these webinar series are run under this energy efficiency working group. last things, and then we'll leave the floor to the moderator. In the energy efficiency group, we published last year a survey, an ESCO market survey in the region to really give you the insight about the challenge and opportunities. So this survey is fully available under our website. Please, you can download it very easily, and we'll update and relaunch a new edition in September 2020, and we will be covering UAE, also Saudi Arabia. It was very brief on my side. Should you have any questions, or if you want to go into a little bit more discussion, understand more about what we do and how we can be involved into the organization, please reach Ahmed or myself, and we will be able to have a discussion with you on that. Now I will hand the floor over to our moderator, Ivan, who will introduce the panelists and engage the event.
Hi there, thank you, Sophie. My name is Johan Walters. I'm a partner with Evershed Sutherland. We are an international law firm, and I focus on energy and infrastructure work at Evershed Sutherland. I'm based in Dubai, and I'm a director with the Clean Energy Business Council. And I work with Sophie and Ahmed on the initiatives of the Clean Energy Business Council. We've got a fantastic session for you today. We have 3 panelists, and we will be hearing from the 3 panelists shortly. We have Leah, Amin, and Gaurav. We'll have 2 case studies, one from Amin from Inova, and then another one from Gaurav from ONG, Smart for Energy. We'll take questions. There is a question facility on the portal, so we'll take questions if we can and if we have time. There'll be a session at the end as well for live questions at the end of the session. And then to the extent we can't answer any of the questions, we will be preparing written responses to the questions and circulating those to all of you after the webinar. The webinar will also be recorded so that we can share that with anybody that has not managed to join the live session with us today. And we will also be sharing all of the presentation material that you will see from our panelists today with you after the event. So without further delay, I'd like to introduce you to our first panelist, who will speak for around 15 to 20 minutes. Her name is Leah Webster. She is a principal at the Facility of Energy Solutions, and she provides technical consulting to a variety of clients. She specializes in energy-related training, commissioning buildings, and then verifying the energy savings from all of those products. She also chairs the International Performance Measurement and Verification Protocols Subcommittee, and is extremely knowledgeable in the area of measurement and verification. And we'll hear from Leah now around the impacts of COVID on the ESCO M&V activities in general. So I will hand over now to Leah. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. I am going to, let me see if I can see my slides. I am going to turn off my camera. So I am Leah Webster, and I am part of the International Protocol Measurement and Verification Technical Subcommittee. I work for Facility Energy Solutions, and I am here today to talk to you about routine and non-routine adjustments in energy projects. Because we have a big crew today, I wanted to start with a little bit of the basics and some background information on IPMVP, very quickly go through routine and non-routine adjustments, and then I'd like to focus on making non-routine adjustments. talk about some of the key considerations, especially in ESCO projects, and some additional considerations given this specific situation we are in with the COVID-19 effects. IPMVP, I trust that most, if not all of you, are familiar with the IPMVP. It is the key measurement and verification protocol. It is used worldwide. It's been available since the 1990s, and it is recognized around the world. It has been translated into at least 10 languages and is used in more than 40 countries. It provides a framework to determine energy savings. Because energy savings cannot be directly measured, it is the absence of energy that we are defining. It takes a specific set of terms and definitions, as well as specific approaches to determine those. So we have 4 M&V options. I'm primarily going to be speaking about option C, which is based on whole building energy metering, and the requirements in the IPMVP for non-routine adjustments. IPMVP is published by EVO, which is the Efficiency Valuation Organization. It is an international non-governmental organization that provides tools to quantify energy efficiency in business transactions. IPMVP is one of the products that EVO supports. The goal of the organization is to build confidence in energy efficiency as a reliable resource and to ensure that impacts from energy projects are determined appropriately with M&V. Very quickly, measurement and verification is the process for planning, measuring, and verifying energy savings within an individual facility. Our primary objective is to reduce performance risk through measurement and verification. This is especially important for ESCO projects where it is a risk-sharing contract. And the purpose of the measurement and verification is to calculate and report the energy savings from the specific project. This chart shows the concept behind IPMVP and option C, which is the whole building metering approach. So very quickly, I wanted to just run through this to make sure that everyone was on the same page to start. So this is a diagram that shows over time the periods within the measurement and verification process. We have the metered energy baseline on the left-hand side, which is the energy used prior to implementing energy conservation projects. And then we have the metered energy on the right during the reporting period. After the ECM installation, things can change. So the metered energy baseline is modeled using a mathematical regression that includes key variables that drive the energy use, such as outdoor air temperature. So that allows the metered baseline energy to be adjusted to reporting period conditions, allowing an adjusted baseline energy. So this is what would have happened without the energy project. And this is based on the mathematical model from the baseline period before the project occurred. The savings then that are reported either as avoided energy consumption or normalized energy savings is then the difference between the adjusted baseline energy, or what would have happened without the energy project as predicted by the mathematical model, and the metered energy use. That metered energy use can be normalized to a common set of conditions by creating an additional mathematical model of the reporting period, and then having both the baseline and the reporting period energy adjusted to those same conditions. And that would be normalized energy savings. The idea we call that is routine adjustments. These routine adjustments account for expected changes in energy consumption based on the independent variables. So independent variables that are included in the mathematical model, such as weather and occupancy, are used to adjust the baseline energy so that it can be directly compared to the reporting period energy or to a normalized reporting period energy. And so this gives us what we like to call an apples to apples comparison. So what happens when things don't stay the same over time as expected? You can have a long baseline period that establishes very solid and continuous usage patterns, and then an event that causes unexpected changes in the energy use comes along, such as this shelter in place and COVID-19 situation that we are all dealing with. So if your energy usage changes within your measurement boundary, and your measurement boundary is either the whole facility for option C, the meter, or it could be for retrofit isolation, and these are due to changes unrelated to the energy project and unrelated to the independent variables. We call these static factors. You can see this chart shows an example of an unexpected change in energy use in the blue. You see that step change where there's a continuous and uninterrupted change in the primary variable. Sorry, I'm having trouble changing my slide. There we go. So when an event like this takes place, we may have to make a non-routine adjustment in addition to the regular adjustments, the routine adjustments, to account for these changes and how they have impacted our energy savings. So a non-routine adjustment is an individually engineered calculation that is determined for a specific project in a specific situation to account for the effects to your energy savings from these externalities that have changed. I have the static factors, and there was a download available regarding static factors, and it is a not a comprehensive list, but it's certainly a large list of static factors, which is a bit of a misnomer. We call them static factors rather than variables because they are not included in the energy model, but they are key characteristics of a facility which affect the energy consumption. So these are characteristics that are not expected to change. They're not included in the mathematical model, and typically we want to have those fully documented during the baseline period. So if you've done a comprehensive energy audit according to ASHRAE or others, you will typically have documented the vast majority of these key elements around your facility. It's important that they're documented in the baseline and tracked for changes for the duration of the project, because these static factors are used to validate any non-routine adjustments that are needed. And if you do not have that data, it is very difficult to have something to compare it to. Having these static factors documented also ensures that the impacts that we are measuring in the energy use are from the energy conservation measures and not from other changes at the facility. So here is that document, or a piece of that document that lists several metrics. They're categorized by facility overview, hours of use, heating, ventilation, cooling, industrial loads, kitchen, cooking, hotels. It depends on what your drivers are, what will be the most important static factors for your facility. So that will vary. And this document is a part of the new non-routine events and non-routine adjustments application guide that IPMVP is working on with my team and Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. So that's a little bit of a sneak peek on what we're going to have included in that document. So one of the things about non-routine events is that it can have a different impact depending on when it occurs during your project. So if you're in your baseline period and you encounter a non-routine event, you will have more increased uncertainty in your energy model. The unexpected variation, if included in your baseline model, will create less certainty in the predictions. It can also invalidate your baseline model if there is data that is included. Excuse me, if there is data that is included that does not represent what is going to be in the future. So you have to be careful about those non-routine events in the baseline period skewing your energy model. Now, if you're in your implementation period and you encounter a non-routine event, it can either obscure or inflate the savings from your energy conservation measures. And that's actually one of your worst case scenarios, is if you're in the implementation period. More difficult to address. If you're in the reporting period, a non-routine event will show as a direct increase or decrease in your avoided energy use. It will have a similar impact on normalized savings. Again, it will add uncertainty if you have a reporting period model. And if your reporting period contains extraneous operational scenarios, it may invalidate those models. So what can you do? So options by project period in terms of making a non-routine adjustment or dealing with a non-routine event. You can extend your baseline period until the operations stabilize. You can exclude that period of time if the impacts are temporary. Perhaps you have a new normal, and in that case, or a cyclical event. In that case, if you have data that spans both the old and new operations, that could be a very good thing. And in that you're capturing that operating scenario that is the COVID-19, for example, impact on your facility. And so you can determine the impacts and make a non-routine adjustment is the other option. Similarly, in the implementation period, you could extend the period until stable operations are met, or you can consider another M&V option. If you're able to submeter your measures, I think that's highly recommended. Reporting period, you can omit data from the reporting period, extend either claim no savings, extend the reporting period, determine the impacts and make a non-routine adjustment, or you can just pause the contract and let it come back and wait until it comes back to normal, if it does. I think that's one of the great unknowns right now. Is it a non-routine adjustment? Not every odd event needs to be actually adjusted to make the impact to savings. Assessing whether or not it is significant, how much has it affected your energy savings? Is it temporary? Is it permanent? Is it going to be reoccurring? Has it increased or decreased your energy savings? These are important questions to answer before you can come upon a solution for how to move forward. Whatever you do when you're making a non-routine adjustment, you need to use a cost-effective but accurate and conservatively estimated method. It's best to follow the ECM option that you have, the M&V option you've used for your ECM. So for example, option B and C, you would want to use either sub-metered energy data or regression modeling strategies. These are available for a variety of situations. In lower value situations, you may find that engineering calculations will be okay. I would encourage you to consider the life cycle value of the non-routine adjustment. However, before you put a number on your savings that you are not very sure about. There's some basic data if you're going to need to make a non-routine adjustment. You're going to need some details about that event, when, where, how much. You're going to need what are the details in your contract. This last item, I think, becomes very salient in this situation as you're dealing with performance contracts, that, you know, what allocations have you made at the beginning of the project for assessing these situations? So if you have a non-routine adjustment, if you deemed it's required, you feel that the impact to your savings are significant, you really have three primary options. You can omit the data, you can quantify the impacts and make a non-routine adjustment, or you can redefine the baseline model. All three of these approaches are considered non-routine adjustments. So if you omit the data, you might claim no savings for that period. You could extend the contract to make up for that time period. If you wanted to quantify the impacts, you find that your baseline model is still valid. The loads and temperatures and scheduling still allows that baseline model to be accurate. Then you can use that to quantify impacts and to make a non-routine adjustment. Oftentimes, we find that our baseline model is no longer accurate. However, we have some permanent changes, either with reporting period variables beyond the range of the baseline or vice versa. Sometimes additional independent variables are required for the reporting period. This is specifically when static factors start to change, they become independent variables. So one of the most straightforward ways to address a change is to add the static factors that are beginning to change into the baseline model as independent variables. That allows us to redefine the baseline model, and you can calculate avoided energy savings by using backcasting. There are other options you could consider, such as capping the range of variables, limiting savings, or reverting to another M&V option. But whatever you decide to do, the resolutions really need to be based on the content of your contract and M&V plan. Now, hopefully you have some ideas and set aside for non-routine adjustments. Perhaps you have a force majeure clause that would come into play in this situation that would allow you to make adjustments to your M&V approach. Regardless of what you do, it needs to be agreed upon solution, and the risk sharing that is embodied in the rest of the contract should be brought forward into your non-routine adjustment. You can consider adjusting your investment duration of lease terms. It's important to remember, if your contract is set up strictly on kWh savings, that there's also a value there with the installation of the new equipment and that potential to perform. So it may be worth reevaluating that lease term. This is my last slide. It's a very quick example. I just wanted to show you very quickly what a non-routine adjustment might look like. So here's an example of an industrial project that's in the second year of its reporting period. And it's come in and we have an added system. We have an added fan and pump system. So we've chosen to sub-meter those key elements, the fan and the pump, along with the key operating parameters to ensure that it really is a steady operation and to see the operating mode. So we've established a baseline model that you see here that includes two different variables, the moisture content and the production volume. And we were able to revise that to include the 379 kW, that is the steady hourly increase in load that we see from the system here that has been added. So as I mentioned before, we are about to publish a non-routine event and non-routine adjustment application guide for the IP MVP. We're very excited about that. We also have in the works an advanced meter-based measurement and verification application guide to bring forward our option C, advanced modeling strategies. So that should be available soon. And there is a quick poll for you to answer if that comes up now. And I thank you for your time today.
Hi there. Thank you very much for that presentation, Leah. That was extremely useful and informative, especially around the adjustments that are required to be made to for non-routine adjustments. It's a very detailed run through of the options available to us for non-routine adjustments. We're moving now on to the second panelist, who is Amin Najjar. He is a director of operations for Dubai and the Northern Emirates and Oman, Lebanon, and Egypt for Inova. And Amin has been with Inova since 2014. He currently holds the position of operations director. He has a strong focus on strategy and implementation, and he's overseeing a portfolio of around $100 million through a system of agile management focused on continuous improvement and value creation. So I'll hand over to Amin now, and he's going to go through a case study with us, which will be extremely informative for us. Thank you, Amin.
Thank you. You can see my screen?
Not yet. Yes,
Okay,
we can now.
Okay.
Yes, we can now. Thank you, Amin.
Good. Hello, everyone. I'm going to take you through a short presentation regarding the process of MNV that we oversee at Inova, and some shared experience on the COVID effect, especially when it was declared that all malls should shut down and only supermarkets and pharmacies are allowed to open, in addition to some glass shops, eyewear shops. So first, let me start by introducing our Hubgrade, and this is how we do energy management. So we have our smart live monitoring and control platform called Hubgrade. It includes all the digital services that we deliver. Since Inova is 100% on the cloud, so this is a cloud-based solution where it is integrated with CAFAM, finance, HR, so everything is integrated on the cloud. We connect the building on the Hubgrade, and the Hubgrade is fully integrated with the CAFAM, where the CAFAM is monitored and managed by energy professionals who update the requirements. Some are automated and some based on the studies of the engineers. So it's a closed cycle, since all the work orders that has to be issued for energy management comes on the PDAs of the technicians, that they go and they deliver and they close directly on the PDA. The engineers can see it and see the effect as it goes. So it's a live system in order to reduce any loss as much as possible. This Hubgrade, we have around more than 23,000 points that we are monitoring. Inova now we have bank guaranteed 68 million AEDs in savings. We have issued in 2019 3,100 work orders regarding energy, and we are now introducing some new proof of concept works regarding machine learning regarding energy as well. And this will help us as well in the condition-based maintenance. So the regular journey of the MMV, as we saw with Leah, is we check the history. We sometimes, most of the times, we install loggers. We perform the ASHRAE level 2 audit. We create the regressions, and we set the baseline. We identify the coloration, so what's affecting the energy saving. We connect to Hubgrade. We monitor the results, then we normalize based on these correlations, and then we submit to the client based on a live dashboard. And this is usually a straightforward, if you want, process, and it gives you a very clear picture of the baseline and the adjusted baseline. So everything was clear until suddenly change happened, and it happened in an abnormal way. And this is when COVID hit, and we were asked to shut down the malls almost entirely. So before the shutdown, the main impactful factors on the adjustment was humidity and temperature. Footfall, or the number of people visiting, was part of the equation, but since it was stable, it did not affect the normalization drastically. And just for the information, Mall of the Emirates has visitors around more than 44 million visitors a year. The average daily visitors for Mall of the Emirates is around 120 to 150,000 visitors per day, which is a huge complex we're talking about. So after the shutdown, the humidity and temperature kept the effect, and then suddenly we had a huge disruption in footfall and on-off, which is shutting down the equipment in certain locations. So how did Inova approach this event? We used the change management process that usually is advised by McKinsey. So it's aspire, assess, architect, then we action, we advance, monitor, learn, and adjust. So I'm going to take you through these steps for Mall of the Emirates. Again, some information about Mall of the Emirates. It's one of the biggest shopping malls in the world. It includes Ski Dubai, which is an indoor ski slope in the middle of the desert. We have around 630 plus brands, and as I said, it has 44 million visitors per year. So Aspire, the minute this happened, we sat with the client and we set a target that was a high-level target of 65% cost reduction, since the mall is almost in shutdown except of a certain area. So we agreed, and this should be around 65% cost reduction in utilities. And then we assess the situation. You can see this
Hi there, it's Yuan Walters here. We seem to have lost audio on Amin. I don't know,
yes.
Amin, if you can hear us.
Yes.
That's better. Okay, we lost the audio. You may want to go back one slide because we lost your sound.
Okay. So as I said, the assessment part, we took this is the mall in 2 floors. The blue area is the area that was allowed to operate, and everything else was shut down. The red is shut down, and the yellow is the parking that was allowed to open. After we did the assessment, we architected the shutdown based on each asset. So we went through the asset list, and we identified the on time and off time, and which period it will be operating. After we architected this shutdown, we delivered. So we actioned the shutdown, And as you can see, it started on the 24th of March. The blue curve is the shutdown, and the yellow one is 2019 numbers. So you can see big difference in utilities based on shutdown. So this is electricity, and then we have water as well. It is worth mentioning that our baseline for Mall of the Emirates is 2018 figures, as you saw in the previous data. And we had a loading factor of 0.7, so 70% of the time the overall system was operation, if you want. In 2019, due to some energy performance measures that we did, the overall loading factor went down to 0.65 or 65%. These are important figures for the non-routine adjustments. So after this, we did the routine adjustments that is based on footfall. It was based on weather, and the savings was still 50% saving, which is abnormal, of course. So we went down to the sub-meters, as Leah described, and we identified again the regular adjustment that is based on footfall. So this is the areas that were actually operational. So we adjusted based on footfall and weather, and we identified the overall loading factor during shutdown was 0.25 or 25%, and we adjusted based on loading factor. So between 2019 0.65 and 2020 0.25, there's around 0.4. So we adjusted based on this difference in loading factor on each MDB or sub-meters, and then we did it over the overall project. This gave us some learning. So first, during the complete shutdown, we had only 15% of the capacity. That's in footfall. So the footfall was 15%. The consumption went down between 70 and 75% year on year, so compared to 2019. The best approach was to go into the MDBs, prove our MNV process, which is routine plus non-routine based on load factor, and deliver the figures in order to make sense, and then take it on the whole mall. So when we identified that this is relevant, the model was used on the overall state, and we established with the non-routine adjustment that actually our saving based on our initiatives was 8%. So the reduction was 70 to 75%. Around 30% adjustment was of this. 25% was due to footfall and weather, around 30%, and the rest was due to shutdown, and 8% was due to Inova efforts. So these are the savings, as we said. It's based on the routine and non-routine adjustments. So in conclusion, since this was an unprecedented thing that happened, we really counted on IoT and sub-metering to deliver this MNV approach. We identified the non-routine adjustment that needed to be taken. We executed, and now we're now building the new norm, which is after the COVID, because as of yesterday, the malls open in 100% because it was gradual. It was 30% occupancy allowed, 70% occupancy allowed, and now it's 100%. So now we are back to probably somewhere close to the new normal, and using our agile approach, we continue measure, learn, and build again in order to achieve the new norm. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to answer any questions at the end of this session.
Hi guys, thank you very much for that presentation, Amin. That was extremely useful and informative. We've got our third and final speaker now. So I'd like to introduce you to Gaurav Soni. He's a Project Assurance Manager, and he works for ONG Smart 4 Power. I mistakenly referred to them as Smart 4 Energy at the start of this presentation, so I apologize for that. So it's ONG Smart 4 Power, and Gaurav has more than 9 years experience in energy efficiency. He's been at ONG Smart 4 Power for 2.5 years. Gaurav manages the ESCO projects operation at ONG Smart 4 Power, and he's in charge of the energy savings performance contracts of the company in the UAE and KSA. So I'd like to hand over now to Gaurav for the final 10-minute presentation, and then we'll look at answering some of the questions that have come through.
Thank you, Walters, for the introduction, and thank you, CEBC, for organizing this webinar and giving the opportunity to discuss the experience that we have. I'll just share my screen moving forward. So talking about the impact of COVID-19 on ESCO and MNV activities, Leah and Amin both summarized the entire process of carrying out measurement and verification for projects, especially with the static factors and why it is so important. I would like to just continue with the same fact, giving a small introduction about our company. So ENGIE needs no introduction. It is a global energy actor with activities in more than 70 countries and expanding forward. Amazing revenues of about 60 billion euros in 2019 itself. It's 25% owned by the French state. It has various divisions, as any of us might be aware of. There is about generation, distribution, and now a new segment, which is customer solutions, which deals with energy efficiency. Smart 4 Power, based in UAE, Dubai, is basically a leading energy efficiency solutions provider for commercial sector, residential sector, and now expanding to industrial as well. Since the inception in 2012, we have done more than 200 energy audits, implemented more than 40 energy efficiency projects, turnkey, shared savings, guaranteed savings, and have accumulated more than about 50 million dirhams in savings from the projects. We have one office in Saudi running in Riyadh, and another one in Dubai, and expanding to other areas. Everyone must be aware about how the process of MNV goes on. I will just to run a small poll. Ahmed, if you can run that, the first one. So I would just like to understand the audience here. What's your role in the current ESCO market? So are you an asset owner, an ESCO implementing ECMs, a solution provider, or providing finance, or from any other aspects supporting the energy efficiency field? Now, while the poll is going on, I would like to stress on the factor that MNV activity is just guidelines for us to follow. In the end, it's the application of the MNV professionals into the projects which really defines how the savings are being calculated. Everybody has different approaches, but sticking to the IPMVP ensures that you are following the international norms of verification of the savings and can actually quantify the savings for your client. So we, as I see, most of us are from the ESCO background, and some of them are solution providers. That's very interesting, because this particular webinar is addressing to these individuals who are involved in the projects, running the projects, and basically carrying out the MNV. So moving on to the next slides that we want to discuss. The topic of identification of independent variables and static factors. Leah, in a previous session, just described beautifully how it is very much important for us to identify all the parameters that enable us to quantify or relate the energy consumption of a facility to its operation conditions. Some of the factors which is listed out and are also coming up in the new MNV version, we just like to point out that for the case study that we have, we looked at the following factors that affect the energy consumption of that particular facility. We looked at the occupancy, the weather, the building utilization, basically how many number of guest rooms, types, conditioned area, total floor area, and then looked at the set points of the HVAC system as well as for the different aspects like the guest room setback temperature, what's the pool operating temperature, what's the hot water temperature, domestic water tank temperature. For the people in GCC and particularly in UAE, domestic water tank temperature is also a very important factor, as in the summer the tank temperatures rose to a very high levels of about 35-40 degrees. So you need to cool down to make sure that the Legionella does not affect the domestic water. So that's one important factor that we have considered. And obviously this some common area set points, how the common lobby and other areas are maintained, ventilation rates, and the total connected load. Now this is very important because at the start of the MNV activity, what are the parameters we need to measure and record all of them in the baseline model. So that's first part of the MNV activity. Then obviously at the time of implementation, you make sure that the ECMs are working, but during the reporting period, it's very much essential that we keep a record of all these changes as and when it happens. Now, some of the baseline strategies that we have used and would like to highlight is for the projects that are option A based, we do not need any non-routine adjustment. Let's say for an example of a lighting retrofit, the operating hours were estimated, hence you can vary that very accurately during the post-operation period. For options B and C, which are long-term contracts, which are mostly the case in this area, if your retrofit period is more than 6 months, I've already passed more than 6 months, the way we did it is we used a regression model, which is called as an efficient performance model. Basically looking at the post retrofit energy consumption and then relating it to the independent variables that were identified during the baseline to create another model, which is an efficient performance model, which describes the energy use. Then we compared it with the adjusted baseline, and then we said that this difference is basically providing us projected cost avoidance had the business has been in the usual scenarios. So I will just explain that in an example in the later slides. Use submeter data. It's stressed upon by Leah and Amin as well. Use submeter data to calculate the variation from the annual equivalent period. It's very much essential that submeter is used when you're going, especially for option C, that enables you to look at the operation of the facility which are not directly under your scope of ECM implementation. If your post retrofit is less than 6 months, obviously you can use that submeter data and develop quarter hourly advanced analytical model, which would require further time, and obviously you have to consider the cost of the NRA versus the cost of doing the NRA. The other option is to suspend or extend your contract under situations become normal conditions. These are the few factors, and if you do not have any proper documentation of static factors, obviously discuss it with the client and see how you can best come to a solution which describes the change, or most of us would be doing is to suspend or extend the contract in most of those cases. Now the case study that we have here is an upscale hotel in UAE Dubai Marina. Just to give you a brief about the facility, it's a hotel located in Marina, operating since 2015. You can see that it's a 3-star hotel, 3-4-star hotel, 28,865 square meter space, basement, ground, 32 floors, consisting about 484 guest rooms, superior suites, junior suites. So this is just the classification of the different types of guest rooms that we had accounted for during our audit. Also, it has 2 restaurants, 1 gym, and a swimming pool. The implemented ECMs were basically the chiller plant manager, controlling the chillers and the pumping system, the wet wall system. It's an enclosure that's quite prevalent here in the GCC and region. FAHU optimization and VFDs on exhaust and makeup fans for the kitchen. So these were the identified ECMs for implementation, apart from the other lot of group. The current situation. The facility has been closed since 25th of March. Our contract started in October 2018, so it's almost 19 months in operation, with 2 months in lockdown where the entire hotel has been closed. Only HVAC system is operating to maintain the healthy state of the interior. Set point increased from 24 to 27. Guest room FCUs are operational to maintain the furnitures. Fresh air operation reduced to 8 hours. So as we understand, the ECMs that we implemented are still in operation as they relate to the HVAC system. If we look at the performance of the building in this case, The green area denotes the energy savings that was incurred for the period. And as we go and move towards the region, which is basically April and May, we see that there's a huge drop in the energy consumption and we see a huge savings increase. Now here we have seen that 74% reduction in in bill-to-bill energy consumption, while when we calculate the net savings, we got 74%. So does that mean we can accommodate and say that yes, these savings are by our ECMs? Obviously no. We need a way to differentiate between the various components of these, which are then provided in the next one. So the reasons and the baseline adjustment. We had a reduction of operation, all services related to the occupancy, the pool, the spa, the restaurants, everything closed down. We had reduction in occupancy. We had reduction in building heat load as the set point was increased from 24 to 27. Obviously, the weather makes a routine adjustment and the impact of the ECMs, which are then running. This all resulted in a gross reduction of 75%. So how did we basically went on to do that? Is we applied some engineering principles and our experience. We used sub-meter data for occupancy and operation. We used CDD coefficients for weather, which was defined in the baseline model itself. For the impact of ECM, we basically did a post-retrofit energy use model or the energy performance model for after the implementation was carried out and find out the difference between the two. And then obviously a change in set point where we substituted the CDD with a higher base temperature. So we used base temperature of 21 in our model. We implemented a 24-degree base temperature in the same model for post retrofit, and then we calculated the difference between due to the change in set points. Now this is the basically giving you some numbers, very specific numbers for this project. You can see that the baseline for these 2 months was about 1.2, broken down into 2 sections, bill-to-bill savings and the actual consumption. So you can see 964 and 316. This was the actual consumption of the facility, which is almost about 75% less. Now from this 964, the challenge was to break down into these sections, which are basically due to ECM, due to drop in occupancy, weather, and reduced operations. We used different formulas, as I explained earlier, to find out these gaps, which then helped us to calculate the adjusted baseline plus the non-routine adjustment. So the conventional formula says that you can calculate the savings by adjusting the baseline and then adding routine adjustments, non-routine adjustments, and then subtracting it from the actual savings. By doing this, we were able to define what's the adjusted baseline and then calculate the savings. Obviously, we went on to claim the savings only due to the ECMs and not due to the set points. And we see that of all the savings of about 964, we are claiming about 170, 975. This means that even in this period of lockdown, because of the ECMs being implemented and monitored through remote access, we are able to save considerable amount of energy for the client, which helps them to reduce their operational cost in this desperate times of, all people are trying to do that. So the message here is very simple, and as highlighted by Amin and Leah, it's very important to highlight and record all static factors in your MNV plan. Look at submitted data at all times, keep a track of the energy consumption, visit your site sometimes to see how the facilities static factors are changing. Is there any addition, deletion of spaces? And at most, and the last important is, when you guarantee the savings, make sure that you look at these factors and use percentage savings more than the absolute numbers. I'm sure some of the people would have their confusion or doubts or questions on this, but as an MNV specialist or a person who is involved in day-to-day, I would appreciate if we have an idea about how this could actually impact your financial models of the whole project. So with this, I would like to wrap up my settings. If you have any questions, please post them. We will try to answer as much as now, or we can get back to you later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gaurav. That was extremely useful. It's very useful to have a live example like you just went through, so that you can visualize the concepts that others have talked about. So that was extremely useful. And the idea now is, I know we're coming to the end of the 1 hour session. What we'd like to do is to extend the session by 10 minutes or so to see if there are any questions. We've had some questions through already. So while we wait for some further questions, I'll start with a question for Leah, which is, what other metrics can be used other than EUI to measure and monitor energy efficiency? So if I can please ask Leah to address that, that would be great.
Sure. EUI is certainly a strong indicator across facilities, but we like to say each facility is very unique, and the best way would be to make a mathematical model of the energy use for each one of those facilities. That's a much more powerful approach.
Okay, thank you. I can't see any new questions, but I'll ask Ahmed to monitor that and send any through to me. But in the meantime, I had a question around all these contracts and all these projects will have been funded either by equity or debt. And as part of any baseline readjustment, when I was listening to all the case studies that you were just going through, I was thinking, if I was the funder, what my position would be on a adjustment of baseline, an adjustment of the savings that would ultimately drive the revenue that will ultimately drive my repayment. So I don't know if Amin would like to pick up on how a well-drafted contract would deal with that scenario of a baseline adjustment.
Yeah. Thank you, Juan. There are two things. It's first the well-drafted contract, and then you have the history. If the contract has been going on for more than 1 year, so it's not a new contract, you have the history of 2019 versus 2018, and you know where those savings should be landing at. On the other hand, any contract has a force majeure and usually has some escalation. As long as the contract is following IPMVP, that they already identified some non-normal adjustments. So all of our contracts actually follow this the specifications, and it's mentioned there that there can be a non-routine adjustment. And then if you get a third party to give the decision on this, they will also follow the same scoring mechanism. And again, it's a force majeure, and it has to follow at the end the laws of the land. And usually they push to find a compromise. But for us, we haven't faced this thing yet, because it's clear what are the steps that can and cannot be done in the IP MVP process.
Okay, thank you. Another question's come through around the period of the measurement of the baseline. So do we have to create the baseline over a year in order to compare the consumption for the same period of time? So is it done on an annual basis, or can you have different periods?
Again, I couldn't hear you one properly.
Sorry, yeah.
I couldn't hear you.
Juan, can you repeat the question? Oh, you're not there.
So I have a question here.
Sophie, can you repeat the question?
I think Iwan has an issue with the mic. So I have a question here. It says, actually, in case of the sharing of savings, what do you suggest regarding the baseline readings versus real-time measurements after the baseline measurements? Whoever wants to take that question.
This question, it's not clear exactly what the attendee wants to ask, but I understand that it's the sharing of the savings, and how do I share the savings regarding the baseline reading versus real-time measurements after the baseline measurements. So here, just to clarify, the baseline measurements are done before the project is actually commissioned. So you establish, and if you're using option C in this case, it's a regression model which then defines the operating conditions. So the actual baseline numbers don't matter anymore. It's a regression model which is actually used to calculate your as-is condition when during the reporting period. So you would take that regression model, plug in the reporting period data of independent variables that you chose, and then calculate what would have been your consumption had the building operated the same way. And now, because of the projects being done, you have an actual energy consumption which is supposed to be less in some amount of percentages that you expect it to be. So then you calculate your net savings, and then based on your contract, you would share the savings with your client on whatever percentage basis. So it's very essential that when you consider baseline measurements, it's used to calculate only the regression model, and then that regression model becomes your base for all savings calculation going forward in your reporting period.
Yeah. So it's used to create the regression and the guaranteed savings, so the targets.
Absolutely.
And then you forget about it.
I hope you can hear me now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I have a question. I think it's for Leah. The question is, in a nutshell, what will advanced M&V 2 add to the current IP MVP concepts?
That's a good question. Thanks for that. And we expected the advanced M&V to have more impact to option C than it turns out that it does. Option C is well constructed for advanced modeling methods. So primarily what that application guide is going to include is more detail on the kinds of models, how you make models, considerations in making models, kind of a little bit more in depth on those advanced modeling tools. We had a white paper that came out a few months ago in January that was a precursor to that highlighted some of the measurement and verification tools, some of the free software calculation tools that are available. But the application guide is going to look a little deeper for those who do custom modeling, so they can have those considerations right in front of them.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, Amin, did you want to add anything there?
No, I just saw a question that's important here. Someone asked about the indoor air quality and comfort inside the property while we are tackling energy. Most 99% of the contracts will include KPIs that tackles comfort. So you will have three sets of KPIs, because usually when you embark on an energy performance contract, you have to maintain the equipment as well. So you have the health of the equipment as one set of KPIs. You have the energy, and you have the comfort inside the premises. For example, we have operational time, uptime of all the equipment. This is one of our KPIs. The savings, plus the temperature, humidity, and even number of particles in the air in order to maintain the fresh air. So all of this is in the same contract KPIs. It's not separated. Otherwise, yes, you can just switch off the switch and leave, and you can get your energy saving. It's all identified in the contract.
Okay, there's another question here. Why don't you isolate the ECM and use option A or B and not the total building option C to avoid the sudden change like COVID-19?
I can speak to that just to start. If you've chosen an option C, right? If you've chosen whole building metering, then you've gone down that pathway with your M&V option. Now, I am strongly suggesting that you have a backup M&V plan. Frankly, if you're going to do an option C, you should know enough information about your baseline conditions that you can go back and do an option A. You need to have that in your pocket so that you can do it. We really prefer not to mix engineering calculations with sub-metered energy calculations. I think all of us here, many of us here are energy engineers, and we know that's an apples to orange. Orange's situation. So that's the primary reason we don't just say, let's just go to option A and do that, because we're using option C, and it's a very valuable tool.
We've got 5 minutes left. There's a question here for Gaurav. What happens if the original projections will not be achieved in the near future? Does this mean adjustments on the contract period?
So just to understand, the original projections means the original projections of the savings, right? I would understand that would be the word meaning on this one. So if they're not achieved in the near future, which is a real possibility, example, the hotel cases, obviously when the hotels do reopen, you're not expecting them to be full occupancy as you had a year back. And obviously you will have for the same for malls and the other places, people are aware, I mean, they're not going to be there. So in this case, how do we move forward? The most important for us is to understand that as IPMVP, it does not say what do you guarantee as savings. You can choose any number, absolute number on any baseline, and you can guarantee that. What's more important for us as MNV engineers is to understand the percentage savings are we able to calculate from an adjusted baseline. So moving forward, if you're able to adjust your baseline for reduced occupancies, moving again in that 6 months time period, you should be looking at whether you're achieving your targeted percentage savings rather than the absolute numbers. Because example, a baseline drops by 50%, obviously you cannot achieve savings if you're guaranteeing 50% of the original baseline as absolute numbers. So I would suggest that you look at percentage savings and try to work out with the client to see how well you can come on a consensus on agreeing to move forward.
And one thing, the contract is not a 1-year contract. When you have an EPC, it's a 5 to 6 year contract. So whatever you're trying to sell the client now, it's going to be very clear if it's correct or close to correct next year or the year after, because this is not going to stay forever. So no one would want to try to slip something in a 6-year contract, because it's going to haunt them.
True, absolutely true.
Okay, I've got one question here. What are the major static factors need to be considered for a multiple residential based building?
That's a great question. And I can safely say, I don't know. Each building is different, and I'm not a residential building specialist. I typically do large commercial industrial. But determining that, what those key static factors are, is really your job as the energy engineer. And so looking at your energy balance as you do your energy audit, to see, what are the big players, what are the big pieces of equipment, what has the capability to shift, and those will really help you target what those are. It very well may be number of tenants or number of occupied residents or something else. I don't know. It depends on if they have a lot of central systems as well.
Yeah, loading factor might be something, because now everyone is working from home as well.
I'd like to draw an end to the session now. We've had a fantastic attendance, a nearly maximum number of attendance, and there's a huge attendance still online. I'd like to thank all of our panelists and speakers, and Sophie and the Clean Energy Business Council for arranging this session. The session has been recorded, so we will share that with you all, and the slides and the materials that we've been using. If there are questions that remain unanswered, we'll follow up with those, and we'll try and send out written replies to those questions so that everybody has those answers. So I'd like to thank Leah, Amin, and Gaurav for their time, and wish everybody a safe and wonderful weekend. Thank you.
And
Thank you, everyone.
How do we